Dave Anderson. What's up, man?
How's it going?
It's going good, man. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, man. Living the dream.
Yeah, man, you got that big old smile on your face, man. It's good to see you, even though we could see each other pretty much every week. So hey, let's get started with this. This particular show is geared towards business owners, entrepreneurs, family men. You know, talk to me a little bit about your business first and what you do.
Sure. So I'm the owner and creative director of Chimaeric Motion Pictures. We're a motion picture video production company that's based in Columbia, Missouri. Primarily, we do television commercials, like high-end regional, national television commercials. And then we also do specialized services for independent films and documentaries. So like color correction, mastering, sound mix, that kind of stuff.
Man, how long have you been doing that for?
I mean, professionally, I've been doing video since I was in probably high school. I started using video as a way to do um, visual aids when you had to do projects. I don't know, my age, you had to like have poster boards and like glitter and markers and all this kind of stuff. And I found that I could actually make videos that were somewhat related to the subject, but because it was a video and it was unique, I got A's. And so that was really kind of how I started making video. Professionally, I started in 2007 was when I got my first job in video production, and then joined the company that I now own under previous ownership in 2008, and have been with that company through the evolution, and then actually acquired it in 2014.
So before we jump into deeper of your business and all that good stuff, because I'm obviously very curious of like, okay, I worked for this company as W-2, but I'm going to go buy it, because that's a huge paradigm shift in and of itself. And by the way, we're speaking to a lot of guys out there. A lot of guys are familiar with the term side hustle. They want to create a business. They want to do something big. But you, on the other hand, like, hey, I'm a W-2, but I want to buy a business or own a business. So we'll get to that here in a second. But let's start out with some simple questions just for the guys to get to know you. So just share with us what your family looks like.
So my wife, Patty, we've been married for almost 15 years, be 15 years in September. And we were together, 4 or 5 years prior to that. We met in college. I have a one daughter, Rhea, who's 9, and my son, Malik, is 7.
All right. So one daughter, one son. What has been the biggest differences that you have found raising a son versus a daughter versus a son?
Man, I think it's the temperament.
Which one?
It's honest, it's switched. So like when Rhea was born, as a baby, she was a great sleeper. Like, she was just so chill as a baby. And Malik was the exact opposite. He was tough as a kid as far as like sleeping, and just he was cranky. And as they've gotten older, those have completely shifted. So now, Rhea, she's 9. She's got the emotions, and she's got all the things that she's dealing with. And her temper is, she's up and down pretty quickly. And our son is just completely chill. Like, nothing bothers him unless he's really tired. But besides that, like, he's the easiest kid, and nothing bothers him. And so I think that's probably the biggest difference between the two of them. And their humor, they have very different humor, things that they think are funny, and the things that they do that make us laugh.
So talk to me a little bit about what it's like I'm sure you want to raise a strong young woman, strong young man. What are the differences for you?
I think for me, the thing that I'm trying to instill in our daughter is self-worth. I think that there's a certain perception that I think society puts on women of what they should be, what they should look like, how they should act. And I don't want my daughter to succumb to external influences on who she thinks she should be. I want her to be independent. I want her to be her own person, and not feel like she has to acquiesce or mold herself into what society feels like a woman should be. And for my son, I think the biggest thing for him is just teaching him to be gentle. I think that it's kind of the same thing with men, is that there's this idea that we have to be strong, and we have to be fighters and we have to be gritty. And I don't want my son, he's not that way. Like, he's got the biggest heart. We call both our kids our little big hearts, because they're just so caring, and they're just so in tune with their emotions. And I don't want my son to lose that. I want him to stay plugged into his feelings and stay plugged into his emotions, and be able to communicate that, and be able to navigate that, and express that in a way that he's comfortable with, but that he doesn't feel embarrassed by. I don't want him to be embarrassed by feeling, because I think that unfortunately, we teach kids, especially young men, you got to be tough, you got to be strong, you can't show your feelings, you can't show emotion. And I don't want my son to grow up feeling that way. I want him to be comfortable with being and showing exactly how he's feeling.
Man, you've got me curious about that. So how do you help him through? So number one, obviously, so you and I have the same age son. I have a 7-year-old as well. And every night he wants to talk about feelings, which actually blows my mind. Like, it's usually always his idea. And then I guide him through that. I was like, when we first started this ritual, I was like, well, what do you want to talk about? He's like, well, let's talk about feelings. And I'm like, well, feelings that you feel like throughout the day. And he's like, yeah. And so I was like, well, what if we did this? Why don't you or me will identify 3 feelings, like just random feelings, and you tell me what part of the day that you felt them and what was going on. So kind of like that's what's really helped us help him identify how he's feeling, what he's feeling. But I also know for a boy those are hard waters to navigate. And even we as men, because I think our generation, we grew up with like, don't feel your feelings, only
Right.
babies cry, man up, toughen up, which, what, here's the thing. There's a time and a place for that. And I do think we do need to have a dichotomy of raising a gritty, mentally tough son with, and I say with in a big way, emotional intelligence. And with emotional intelligence is, how am I feeling right now? How do I articulate that and communicate that? And then how do I identify maybe what somebody else is feeling, and also help them through that, if I'm helping them through that, or just simply be there with them in that space to be empathetic? What does it even look like? So for you, how do you get your son to maybe be okay with feeling his feelings? Like, that might be number one, is how is he okay with feeling his feelings? And then how are you guiding him through, like, because I know that raw brain at like 7 years old, right? He can have like, "Ah," and then like really low, and like it's like all over the place. So how are you the guide for him?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the big thing is just being present. And so when he's feeling something, just communicating with him, talking with him. If he's upset about something, or if he's angry about something, just taking the time to get on his level and engage with him, and just say like, hey, what's going on? What are you feeling? Why are you feeling this way? Is there anything that I can do to help? And just helping him to develop a vocabulary of what he's feeling, to be able to express that, and then kind of helping him figure out what he wants to do about that. And if he's angry about something, like, what choices does he have? He can throw a fit, sure. Or, and if that's the choice that you make, here's the likely outcome. Or option two, if you're upset, what if you just took a breath and then let's talk about it, and talk to the person that you're upset about, and here's the likely outcome from option two. So which do you think would be a better option one or option two? And 9 times out of 10, he picks option two. And just in the moment of when he's in that state of emotion, and talking him through that, it gives him a break, so that he can kind of take a pause, and then gives him an understanding of, I do have a choice here. I don't have to just immediately react to how I naturally feel. I can stop and make a decision based on what I want. Now he's 7, so it's something that you're doing basically every time that he goes through something like this. And then even up to like when he hurts himself, like he skins his knee or he falls down and he wants to cry, or it's okay to be upset if you're hurt. But a lot of times, that's an instance where we're trying to teach that grit, where we're trying to teach him like, okay, yes, it hurts. Once, if you're not bleeding, let's get up, let's, brush it off. Let's get back to it. Let's get back to playing. Let's get back to it. Let's not dwell on that. But if it's an emotional thing, let's talk about it. Let's figure out what you're feeling. Let's figure out what might be the best path for you to choose here. And then we let him choose. And if he chooses to throw a fit, then he throws a fit. And the consequences that come with that, he sees that. Or if he chooses the other option, he sees that was maybe a more skillful decision for him to make.
The cool thing, there's a lot of good things that I picked up there, but one thing in particular is you never said you should do this or you should do that, right? There wasn't like necessarily that knee-jerk reaction for like, I need to guide him like right now to the direction he needs to go in. You're just sort of like creating that space. And I love the idea of choices too. If you look at the studies of raising kids, and by the way, I'm no parenting expert, but if you give a kid a choice, two choices, three is usually too many, but two choices between one or the other, they're likely to always make a choice, and they're not going to say, I don't know. But if you're like, do you feel this? Do you feel this? Do you feel this? Do you feel that? They're like, that's a lot of stuff. That's too many. But I like how it's like, is it this or this? Which direction do you want to go? And then you're giving him ownership, and you're also giving him practice to make decisions, even at that young age. Real quick, switching gears though, getting back to your daughter, because I want to talk to the men who have daughters too. There was a theme that I picked up on, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but not necessarily getting caught up in like all the comparisons, right? And getting caught up in like, a young girl should look a certain way, be a certain way, all these other things that I think a lot of, unfortunately, young ladies really get caught up in. And she's probably not even into the social media world yet, where like the Instagrams and the Facebooks, and like you're flipping through and like, oh my gosh, all these women have, perfect physical physiques, and they have this going on and that going on. And who am I? And what am I? And what do I have to offer? But it's really standing, in who you are, being okay with who you are, being the best that you can be. But how have you been able to instill that with your daughter? And again, she's 9, but how have you been able to just sort of guide her along with that thought process?
I mean, I think it's been very similar to our son. I mean, we're my wife and I are really big on giving them choices, giving them options, and letting them take ownership over the decisions that they make. Obviously, giving them guidance and kind of helping them to understand what the consequences of choices might be. But I think with our daughter, it's just been just letting her know, like, you're enough. Like, if you love to do this thing, like, go do that thing. If you love to dress this way, then dress that way. If you want to be friends with this person, then be friends with that person. And if somebody has a problem with that, they have a problem with that. You don't have a problem with that, and don't buy into, what they're trying to affect you, because ultimately you choose what you take in and what you don't. And so if you let someone upset you based on something that they say about something that you're doing or something that you're wearing, you're giving them that power. And you shouldn't, because you're your own person and you need to retain that power for yourself. And it's hard. I mean, I get it when you get with a group of kids and you get someone picking on you and that kind of stuff. There are going to be days where she's upset, and there are days that she's talked about, like, she did this thing because she felt pressured to do it, or she didn't want to upset somebody, or whatever. But a lot of times, even in those conversations, she'll come back and say, I wish that I wouldn't have done that, or I didn't feel good about this. And so we'll talk about, well, hey, why did you make that decision? And generally it's because of peer pressure, because she was influenced by something external of her. And then just telling her, like, hey, you have ownership over that. Like, you can make that choice. And if you're proud of the choice that you make, it does not matter at all what anybody else thinks. If you can live with that, and in your heart that's the right decision, then you'll never regret that. And just trying to get her to practice that and understand that that she needs to live her life for her and not for other people or for these external influences. And honestly, like, I'm not terribly worried about her. She's really smart, and she's got a very strong personality, like her mother. She generally does not care what other people think. She's going to do her own thing. She's going to do what makes her happy, and she's going to do it in a way that's kind and that's that helps other people. She's very, again, has a huge heart and wants to help the community at large, help her friends, and be be a source of kindness for everyone around her. So I mean, I'm not worried about either of my kids, but definitely her. I mean, she's going to be a very strong, independent woman.
And you say that with a lot of, like, you just say that with a lot of confidence, which I love that, man. And like, I feel it from you. And for those of you guys who are watching us on YouTube, like, you get it, you feel it. Another thing too, that you have this aura about you, and we talk about it all the time in the Accelerator Mastermind, is to approach every interaction with curiosity and appreciation. Like, I don't get the feeling that you're shoulding all over her, right? Like, you should do this, you should, going back to the should thing, you should do this, you should do that, this is what you need to go do. You're allowing her to become her own person by, again, creating that space of curiosity and appreciation underneath the umbrella of what we teach, psychological safety, right? To where perhaps she feels comfortable coming to you, And again, going back to the choices thing, the options thing, it's either you could do this, these are a few ideas. And I don't even know if I'm speaking for you, but that's the approach that I feel. Is that the approach that you're using?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and again, we've borrowed from your ideology of this idea of just letting them be who they are, giving them choices, and having conversations, asking questions, and because ultimately, like you said, we're trying to teach them. We're trying to teach them to make their own decisions, to make their own choices, and to navigate the world, because we're not always going to be there. And so I think for us, it's this idea of just creating this environment where they can talk to us about anything, and that's one of the things that we actually stole from you was, or learned from you, was this idea of talking with our kids about, you're never going to be in trouble if you tell us the truth. As long as you come to us and you're honest with us and you tell us the truth, even if it's something that somebody else might get punished for, we're not going to punish you if you're honest with us. We may have a conversation about it, and we'll talk about, the decisions that you made, and kind of how we can be better next time, but we're not going to punish you for it. You're not going to get in trouble for it. And so I think that goes a long way into creating that environment where we can have those conversations, and we can have those things where she can be vulnerable, and she can maybe bring up things that she might be embarrassed about, or that maybe she wouldn't talk about, because she knows, we're going to accept her for who she is, and she has nothing to fear in talking to us.
Right. No, I love that, man. We that came back and bit us a little bit. The whole thing of like, you can come here and talk to us, you won't be in trouble if you're honest, and that kind of thing. So I remember we started that whole process when our kids were right around that, 7, 8, 9 years old, right? And it worked really, really well. And now we've had to evolve it just a little bit, because 13, 14, 15 years old, they get a little smarter, and they're like, oh, so if I take my Chromebook in the middle of the night and I tell dad about it, because he's going to find out about it, and I was sneaking on it and watching YouTube videos till 1 a.m., as long as I tell him about it, I'm not going to get punished. And that was going on for a while. And you're like, okay, yeah, I did say that. Okay. So let's have a conversation. Oh, it happened again. Now we have another conversation about, oh, it happened again. Here's another conversation. I'm like, okay, all right, time out here. Okay. So here's the new rule that we have in our house. And for those of you guys who have older kids, that particular strategy, when they're 7, 8, and 9 years old, man, it's gold, right? Teenagers, they start to be like, oh, I'm going to pull this lever because dad said that that's the way it's going to go. So now it's like, listen, do you remember that time that dad got that ticket? He was going 50 and a 35. And they're like, yeah. And I was like, well, I did know that I was speeding. Yeah. And I was like, and I was honest with the cop. Yeah. And they're like, I still got the ticket. Yeah. It's like, so there are still going to be consequences, right? But we need to make sure that the consequences that happen are natural consequences. Okay. And the consequences will usually, I won't say always, but usually for the most part, will land better on the other side if you're honest with them up front. So like if I was a jerk to that cop and be like, no, I wasn't speeding, get in his face, and he'd be like, oh yeah, well, here's another ticket. And here's another one. Oh, by the way, you weren't going 50, you were going 65. Right. And then I get fined more or something like that. So now it's like, okay, like, look, you be honest with me. There may be a consequence. Most likely there might be a consequence. However, I do have a tendency to find out everything that you do. So if you're not honest with me, the consequence will always be way more severe. So it's in your favor that you could roll the dice and we'll have a conversation about it. There might be a confidence or consequence, there might not be, or the consequence will be less severe. And when I dish out the consequence or the natural consequence, I'll also explain to you, if I would have found out about this any other way, this would have been the consequence. Or sometimes I'll dish it out as like, hey, I have a feeling something happened. If you're willing to tell me about it, here's the consequence. If you're not willing to tell me about it, here's the other ones. Which one do you want to pick? Again, the choices, right?
Yep.
And but it definitely still allows that element of psychological safety. Let's switch gears again. What is a quote that you love to live by? Just something that resonates with you.
Oh man, there's so many. I think one that I've known that I've for a very long time, and I don't know who to attribute it to, but it's intelligence is knowing what to do when you don't know what to do. And that is something that for whatever reason has always stuck with me, is this idea of being prepared to handle any situation, even if you don't know what that situation is. And I think a lot of that, the way that I've approached that is, just mostly like mental preparation and just understanding the things that I can control, the things that I can't control, and having the clarity of that. And then when I'm in a situation where something happens that I'm not, it's foreign to me, being able to analyze and say, okay, what can I control? What's out of my control, and being able to navigate that situation.
Got it. Okay. I have never heard that before. So is that really I love the benchmark of like, okay, I'm hit with something that I'm definitely not familiar with. And this is uncharted territory for me. And maybe how I separate the two and how I go about this is what can control and what can I not?
Yeah. Yeah. Again, I think it's this idea of just, knowing what to do when you don't know what to do. So when you're in a situation where it's new to you, how do you handle that situation, and knowing how to navigate the unknown. And again, I think for me, the way that I've come to understand that, throughout my life is that, being able to analyze the situation and say, okay, this is what I can take care of. This is what I can't. This is what I'm going to focus my energy on, and I'm just going to let the rest of that go, because I can't do anything about it, and I'm not going to worry about that.
Makes total sense. That is gold advice. I guarantee you're going to pass that on to your kids, right? If you haven't already.
That's the hope. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a little bit of one of those, like when you first hear it, you have to think about it, and then you have to kind of like you have to analyze, like, what does that actually mean. You
Right.
have to dig a little bit deeper. So I think that, again, for me, it's teaching them that lesson so that when they're old enough to pass that down, they'll understand it, and be able to help that. But yeah, that's one. Again, I heard it a long time ago, and it kind of it was one of those quotes where you had to pause and read it again and think about it. It wasn't just like a pithy comment. It was something that felt like it had some real substance to it, and I think that's probably why it stuck with me.
I love that, man. What's a lesson that you have learned about marriage and fatherhood, maybe the hard way?
Um, uh, Communication and vulnerability is critical.
How so?
Um, well, I think that I think that we try to portray a certain uh, aura about who we are as a human being to the world, and I think that even with our wives and our significant others, like we feel, I think that sometimes, especially early on when we're younger, we're playing a role and we're trying to be something maybe that we don't feel like we are, but we want to portray that. And in doing that, I think, put up barriers to how you actually feel, and you um, don't commit to being vulnerable and being 100% completely honest with your significant other, because you want them to see you in a certain way. You don't want them to see your flaws. You don't want them to think of you in a negative light. And I think that, in my marriage, that got me in trouble by not being able to come and talk to my wife about things that I was struggling with, and trying to just bury it and just push through it and figure out how to navigate these tough situations on my own, because I didn't want to burden her with that, or I didn't want her to think less of me because I was struggling with things. And I learned by making those mistakes, and then ultimately getting to a point where I had to talk with her about it, and then her, explaining to me, like, I wish you would have told me this earlier. Like, I want to help you. Why did you keep this from me? Because, and again, it's just one of those things where you just feel like you have to be a certain thing. You have to put on a certain persona, a certain mask. And with your significant other, they're your significant other for a reason. You shouldn't wear masks in front of them. Like, you should be able to just be exactly who you are and be able to talk to them about anything and be vulnerable and open up about those things that scare you, and open up those things that you struggle with. Because when you don't do that, you deny them the ability to be what they signed up to be when they married you. And when you look at it from their perspective, you would want them to come and talk to you about those things, because, as men, we want to fix things, we want to help, we want to provide, we want to be the solution to whatever problems or questions that they have. But we then don't allow them to be that for us, because we feel like, we have to be that for them. And you could be that for each other. And I think that, understanding that, I wish I would have understood that earlier, because I could have saved our marriage, some heartache, and saved us a little bit of pain. However, I can't say that I regret it, because we wouldn't have the marriage that we have now if we didn't go through that fire. And if we didn't have those issues and then have to figure that out and have to navigate that and come to understand how to communicate in a way that is respectful, that is vulnerable and authentic, and where both of us feel comfortable, where we can talk about things that are uncomfortable and know that the other person is going to receive it. And even if they don't love what they're hearing, they're going to listen and then respond in a way that we can actually have a conversation and we can have communication that is constructive.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that now that we've figured that out, at least right now, I feel like we're invincible. I feel like we can take on and navigate any obstacle that we come across, because we have that connection now, because we have the ability to talk to each other about hard things and not get upset, and be able to listen to each other and approach it from a place of curiosity and a place of love, and not a place of who's right and who's wrong. Mm-hmm. And so I think that, and then that, I think going through that with her prior to having kids has helped us with our communication with our kids, and being able to be more authentic with them and have, adult conversations with them, not treating them like kids, but having conversations with them and letting them make these choices, letting them understand consequences, and it's okay to talk about these things. Not only is it okay, it's encouraged to talk about the things that upset you or that scare you or that feel uncomfortable, because we're your family and we're here to help you figure those things out.
Yeah, there was so much there about the remaining strong, stoic, we're there for them, they shouldn't be there for us. It's a big riff for men, in such a way that I think what most men don't understand. I had Melanie Studley, who is a guest on the show, and she is from the Anatomy of Marriage podcast with her husband, Seth. And she talked about that men need to let their guard down a little bit more. Now, there's a dichotomy there. You can't be like this wet sponge that is just like, oh my God, you're so needy, right? But at the same token, you can't be so tough and stoic that you don't allow them in. Because there was one way that she described it, man, that hit home so hard. And that was, you're my king, I'm your queen. And when my king is down, I want to be that badass queen who's helping hold up my king every now and again. Like, look, you do a lot to push me forward, to lift me up when I need it. Allow me that same thing, because it's just as important to me to do it for you as it is for you to do it to me. Like, contribution, it's one of the 6 basic human needs, right? To contribute to somebody else. And why should we rob that of our wives, right? Which I love the fact that you guys understand that. The other thing too is, you don't blame yourself or come down on yourself. Be like, yeah, man, like these were mistakes early on, but wouldn't be here today had not made those mistakes, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. What about this? What would you wish you would have known before marriage and family about being an entrepreneur?
About being an entrepreneur. This is a hard one, because I'm still figuring out how to be an entrepreneur, and I still feel like I don't have most of the answers. I think what I wish I would have known when I started that journey was just how consuming it was going to be, of my time, my energy, my mental space, my emotions, so that I could have done a better job of creating balance between work and running a business and being an entrepreneur and family. I think when I first took on the business, rightfully so, I'd never done that, and this was how we were going to make money. Like, it was a huge risk. I bought this business, acquired this business from the previous owners 2 months after our son was born. So we had just had our second kid, and I was like, hey, I'm going to take out a huge loan and buy this business, and I'm going to go run it and figure this thing out. And my wife, she basically was like, this is incredibly scary, but I trust you. And if you feel like this is the best thing for our family, then I will 100% support you, but don't screw it up. And so, it's one of those things where then you just pour everything into it because you don't want to screw it up. You want it to be, you know, you want to be the provider for your family. You want to make it successful. You want to be able to, to deliver all of the things and all the hopes and dreams that, that you have for your wife and your kids. And, I think that that decision was the best decision I've made from a professional standpoint. But I've also on that journey made mistakes where work has overtaken my priority as a father and as a husband. And I think that having a better understanding of how to balance that early on is something that I wish I would have known. Um, Again, I don't regret any of it because I think you have to go through that hardship and you have to walk through those fires in order to fully appreciate and understand those lessons. I think it's one thing to read about something or talk about something, and it is completely different to experience it. And I think when you experience it, that's when you actually learn it. And so, even if I had known this intellectually prior to, I don't know that I still don't know if it would have prevented, the mistakes that I made or prevented me from, sliding too far on one side and focusing too much on business and not enough on family. And I think it's a lesson that I still struggle with. I had, at the end of last year, I worked myself, sick. I basically ground myself into the ground and ended up, in bed for 2 days because I was just racked with stress and it just ran my body down because last year it was like we didn't have any work and then we had a ton of work and I just said let's do all of it, and just put it all on my shoulders and tried to carry it to the finish line and ended up collapsing underneath all of that and working back from that and learning from that lesson and trying to figure out how do I not make that same mistake again so that my kids don't see me like that and my wife doesn't have to go through that, because you that's the risk you run when you try to be Superman and you try to put the world on your shoulders and carry it for everyone, is that we're human, and eventually you will collapse underneath that weight, and it's not an experience that you want to have to go through, and it's not an experience that you want your family to have to go through.
Was that a time in your life that you were lone wolfing it?
Um, No, I mean this was just 5 months ago. So I was part. I mean, it was prior to the accelerator, but I was part of the DEA. I was still doing my Friday Fight Club meetings, but I think that there was so much work going on that I was showing up, but I wasn't engaged. And I wasn't taking care of myself physically. Like I wasn't working out because I didn't have time. I wasn't eating well because I didn't have time. I wasn't, doing my meditations. I wasn't doing my morning routines because I was telling myself I didn't have time. I just had this work that had to get done. And the consequence of that is that I lost a week of work, and this was, this happened, 7 or 8 days before Christmas. And so even on Christmas, like I wasn't 100%. And, so for my family, this time where, this is family time. This is when I take time off. This is when we're together as a family. I was not the dad and the husband that I normally am during that time because of how hard I ran and how much I tried to carry on my own at the end of the year last year. On top of the fact that there was a pandemic and all the, I think, underlying base level stress that we all had that we just got used to and didn't account for when we were adding additional stress on top of that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the biggest differences I think with entrepreneurs and, men who have a full-time job is that the weight of the world of that business is on your shoulders. You have to think quite a bit differently. It's neither better nor worse. It's just different. It's a different level of thinking. You always have to be thinking. It's like like a game of chess. You've always got to be thinking about the next move, the next project, how to allocate your time, your resources, your energy. And yeah, what we don't realize as entrepreneurs is that we can put our head down, and sometimes like before you really realize what's happening, you're like, holy crap, my head is like literally under the wheel of this 8-ton truck. I didn't even realize until I got here, right? So How
When
have,
I looked back at that stretch, it was,
yeah,
because I, the nature of my business is I have to sprint like that occasionally, and it's like three or
sure.
4 weeks, and that's just the way that it works. When I looked back at that, it was a 12-week sprint,
Yeah.
which is ludicrous,
That's a
but
lot.
when I'm in the middle of it, you're not thinking about it. You're like, I just got to get through this project, and then the next one comes. I got to get through this project. Well, then I just got to get to this. I got to get to Thanksgiving, and then I got to get to Christmas, and I didn't make it to Christmas. I collapsed before Christmas, and so, I think that, and that's the challenge with being an entrepreneur and as a business owner is like, however hard you work and however hard you want to run and however successful you want your business to be, that's on you to go out and hustle and put that work in and do that. And that was why I acquired the business, because I was looking at being a W-2 employee and seeing how much money I was making, what was, if I get a 3% increase or a 5% increase every year, whatever that's going to be, how much can I save? I got to pay this stuff off. And I looked at the math and I was like, I'll never retire because the math doesn't work. And so if I want to live the life that I want to live and be able to travel and provide, experiences for my family, I have to do something different. So that was what drove me to acquire the business and decide, okay, I'm going to drive this now. But then you also have to figure out, how do you drive this in a way that's sustainable? And how do you run hard to be an entrepreneur and build a successful business, but also make sure that you're a successful father and a successful husband, and you're healthy. You're physically and mentally and spiritually healthy, and that is a hard balance. That figuring out when to run hard and when to relax, and when your business is running and when you really need to put the extra work in. That's the challenge, and I think that that's the thing that I struggle with the most, is understanding, how to ride those waves and when it's okay to take a pause and relax, and when I do need to grind harder, because that's what that time, that finite amount of time requires of me, and it's not something I can do. Not something I can do all the time.
That's another big battle of the entrepreneur is actually incorporating in your rest and recovery time, because that's just as important. If you go, balls out for a long period of time, it will absolutely catch up to you, right? And
Yeah, you have to build it in.
You do.
You can't say I'll rest when I get to the end of this thing, because it doesn't end.
It doesn't.
As an
There's the
entrepreneur in a
next
business,
thing.
it doesn't end. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's always something to do, and so you have to build that time in, and that's something that I'm not great at.
Mhm.
And again, I think that I chalk it up to, like, well, the nature of my business, it's cyclical and project based. It's an excuse. It's an excuse to be. I mean, the projects have continued to come. I've been in business, since 2014, and we've been successful. And we've been profitable, and yet I still haven't figured out how to take time off. Although I set a goal as part of the accelerator to take 4 consecutive weeks off at the end of this year, the last 2 weeks of
Oh, yeah.
December, the first 2 weeks of January. So, but I'm making sure I'm not using that as an excuse to grind myself into the ground up until the last 2 weeks of December.
Yeah. Because we'll do that too.
Yes, we will.
Well, I'm taking those 2 weeks off, so I got to destroy myself and earn this time off.
Yep.
But yeah, so getting to that, I know you've been part of a Dad Edge Accelerator, which is our entrepreneur/business owner mastermind carve out of Alliance. But how has that helped your business, your mentality and psychology around your business? I mean, there are 3 elements that we really obviously focus in on with that particular thing. It's creating a legendary marriage with your wife, that epic connection with your kids, creating that environment of psychological safety, connection, and memories, right? Patience within your marriage. It's creating that relationship, right? That is what we call legendary, right? Where you're taking care of yourself. You have a great partnership, which is the roles, the responsibilities, who does what. It's the friendship. It's that deep knowing of each other. It's the lovers portion. We don't have to explain that to any guy who's particular in the audience. But the other thing too is that all those pillars, all 4, sit on this foundation of communication. And as we talk about emotional validation, talk about tactical empathy. We talk about all these different things to allow that communication to flourish. But then in your business, scaling profitability, when to take time away from the business. In fact, what we really want our guys to do is take more time away from the business and scale it to where it's profitable without them being in it as much. But what has been some of the biggest takeaways that you've taken away from the other men in the group?
I think the big thing is the accountability factor, and I think that as an entrepreneur, and especially one that's in like the motion picture video production, like I don't have any mentors that I like can talk to, or I can call and say, hey, how do I do this, or what does this look like, or how did you do this? I don't have a lot of peers, or really any peers, that are trying to do what I'm doing. But being able to kind of throw my problems out there, the things that I'm struggling with or I'm trying to work on, or like how do I work less in my business and work more on my business, and getting perspectives from a lot of different business owners, and being able to kind of say, okay, well that portion will work for the way that my business works, but not all of it will, and being able to pull all those different perspectives together to then generate an idea or a path forward for myself. I think that's one thing. The other thing is the accountability factor, and that, having to put a goal on the calendar and having to like think deeply about, okay, what am I doing? What goal do I have? Why do I have that goal? How does that line up with being a good father? How does that line up with being a good husband? How does that line up with growing a profitable business? How does that line up with me spending less time, in my business and creating more freedom, and just forcing me to think through those questions more critically. And then once you put that to paper, then you've got guys asking what that progress looks like, and you've got people checking in on you. And if you're not doing the work, they're kicking you in the ass of, why are you not doing this work? This is for you, this is for your family, this is for your kids, this is for your business. Why are you not putting the time into this? What are you struggling with? How can we help? And just having that support group, essentially, that is giving you tough love when you need it, but also helping to inspire you when maybe you're struggling with that. And so I think for me, it's been helping me gain clarity on what I want my business to look like and how I can start to design it to do the things that I want it to do long term, and not just what's the next project I'm working on. And then the accountability of people helping me make sure that I'm actually checking those things off. And even though, like, I've gotten, this past month I've been real busy with project work in April, and so I felt a little behind on my 8-week goal that we're doing for this. But because of my accountability partner and the weekly calls and checking in, I've done at least one thing every week to move things forward, so that now that I'm coming out of that busy project season, I've got 4 weeks to get to the end. And I feel like the goal that I set 4 weeks ago is still attainable, because I was moving things forward incrementally. Whereas previously I would have been like, well, I don't have time this month, I'm super busy, I'll worry about that when I get through this. It's just waiting until you get through that next thing, and then you'll pick it up. And with the accelerator, you don't have the luxury of putting those things off. You've got guys saying, no, you can put an hour in, or you can put 30 minutes, and you can move this thing forward. I don't care how busy you are, make the time.
Joyful accountability is what we call it, right? I mean, that's what really moves the needle. What does it mean to you to live legendary?
So this is one that I was like, I honestly, I didn't know. So I went and looked up legend. Like, what does legend mean? And the definition that I found that I really liked, that I think resonated with me, was it's a legend is a collection of stories about an admirable person. And so for me, it's creating a life with the people that I love through work, or through my family, through friends, my community, but living my life in a way that when I get to the end of that, there's going to be a collection of stories about me that are good, that people look up to some of the things that I've done, or they have great memories of this decision that I made, or this business that I built, or this thing that I did for my kids, or lessons that I've taught, or how I've shared. And so I think, for me, living a legendary life is that when you get to the end of it, not only are you have no regrets about the way that you lived, but you've got a collection of stories that other people are telling about you that will outlive you.
Oh man, I love that. Well, speaking of which, 2 more questions. And one is going to sound morbid, but it's not supposed to be morbid. Okay. We're at your funeral. Okay. And your son and daughter are up there and they're saying, my dad was most meaningful to me because of, what would they say?
So this is actually part of the accelerator. We had to do the
Right.
eulogy. And I, when I read my eulogy, I cried like a baby. And I think, I don't have it right in front of me, but I think it was basically what I talked about at the beginning of this, where my daughter learned, to be herself. She learned confidence. She learned to navigate the world on her terms and not on the world's terms. And that I showed her the type of man that she deserved, or the type of person that she deserved to be with, for the rest of her life. So when she finds her soulmate, she had an example of what that looks like, from me and from her mother, and the relationship that we had. And for my son, it was for him just embracing his heart, for keeping his heart big and keeping his heart open, and just making sure that he shares his heart with the world, and that he approaches the world with his little big heart.
I love that, man. And you know what? At the end of our lives, that's literally all we as my 7-year-old comes in and tackles us during the podcast. But speaking of which, it's the kids that, what are they going to say about us at the very end? And hang on. And I love how that you're so clear on that. There wasn't any pause in that. I think most men who don't really think that way, like, what am I leaving behind? What are my kids going to say about me? Because we're so focused on this day, tomorrow, maybe the weekend, maybe next week. And man, that's it. And we don't really, the funny thing is like 90% of what we do during the day is not even in line with that vision. Right.
Right.
So, yeah. All right. One final question. I'm going to put you in a situation here, and that is your son, your daughter, and your wife, you guys are together on New Year's Eve this year. Okay. End of 2021. And you're talking about the amazing memories and the successes that you've had, just as a family, and the epic connections you guys have made and things that you've done. What are you guys celebrating?
Well, we'll be likely in Colorado at a ski resort, for the family trip, the first family ski trip that we're going to take, because Dad is able to take off 4 weeks at the end of the year. I think we're going to be celebrating a new normal in taking the lessons that we learned from last year, with the importance of spending time together and the importance of family, and figuring out a better balance of work and family. And that because of that balance that we figured out, and being able to draw those lines, we have done more vacations together. We've done a trip to the beach, maybe a trip to the mountains prior to the trip to the mountains. My wife and I will be celebrating 15 years of marriage, stronger than we ever have been, more connected than we ever have been. And I think we'll just be celebrating that family connection, and that we not made it through another year, but we thrived this year more than we had thrived before, because we learned the lessons of last year, and took that to heart, and then actually put that into practice.
Yeah, David, the thing I love about your story is like I'm picturing everything that you're saying. That this moment that you and your family are talking about, and actually where it's happening, right? And you've got this planned out. As we record right now, it's May, right? And most of us don't even have next month planned out, more or less the year, right? And the fact that vision is so clear right now, what do you think the chances of that vision actually happening?
Well, I mean, I think it has to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, especially now that's on the podcast, it's just out into the world, But no, I think it's one of those things, like, we tend to keep our dreams to ourselves. We'll have dreams and we'll keep them in our head, but we don't share them. And I think it's a fear that they won't come true if we put them out there. And I think I'm starting to think that the opposite is true, that if you keep it to yourself, it's never going to happen. But if you put those dreams out to the world, they become real, and then you figure out a way to manifest that. And so I think for me, it's the accountability factor. It's like, okay, this is what we're doing. Now reverse engineer how you get there. And what does that look like in December in order for that to happen? What does that need to look like by November? What does that need to look like by September? And you just work that back to like, okay, so what does that need to look like tomorrow? What do I have to do tomorrow in order to make sure that that trajectory that I need to be on in order to make that happen for my family and for myself hits that mark by the end of the year? But if you don't put that, out there, you don't set that goal, you don't know what you're shooting for.
Amen to that, man. One thing we say all the time is words have power. The things that we say that nobody else can hear, and the things that we say out loud, words have power. They will either move you or keep you exactly where you're at. So well said, man. Well, hey, I just want to make sure that everybody can find you. And obviously, if anybody ever needs any videography business, where can people find everything that you're doing?
Yeah, so Chimaeric Motion Pictures, that website is it's a CHIMAERIC.com, chimeric.com. I'm not really on this. I mean, I'm on the social stuff, but I'm not really on the social stuff. That's something I kind of gave up. Probably Instagram would be the best place to find me. I'm at Cinematic Dad on Instagram, and that's more personal stuff. But those are about the only two places you'll find me. That or on Friday Fight Club, Team Ritter.
Team Ritter. That's right. Well, hey, check this out, guys. So this is our first of this show, but not really the first. We've been doing Thursday Throwdown for, my gosh, how long have we been doing Thursday Throwdown? 265 episodes. So what we're doing now is we are doing Fierce Fridays, and there's a reason for that. The reason we're doing that is because we release show on Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. What we want to do is give you guys a day of breathing room between shows. So we're gonna be hitting you up every other day now with a better cadence. Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So this is Fierce Friday. Okay. So what I want you guys to do is go to gooddadproject.com/Friday1. Friday and then number 1. This is the first show of Fierce Friday. Same premise, same thing we've always done, just different day. Easy to remember. So gooddadproject.com/Friday1 for this show. David, thank you, man. This was fun. And I love your vision. Just to recap a few things. I love the vision. I love the intention. I love the advice around marriage. I love giving yourself some grace and rest. I love the vision around what the rest of this year is going to look like, what your kids are going to say about you after you're long gone. And these are the things that move. These are needle movers, right? Everything else can be busy work. And the reason we do businesses and the reason we own businesses is not to work ourselves into a minimum wage job. It's to do the work that make us come alive, that we can spend as most time and have the biggest impact with the people that mean most to us, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, brother, man, I appreciate you, and looking forward to seeing you in our group.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. It's been a blast.
You bet, brother. Gentlemen, go out and live legendary. Take care.